What's up, everybody? When you think about Madden, you probably think about me and my show Man vs. Madden, or that guy named John Madden, the 82-year-old Hall of Fame football coach and longtime football broadcaster. You probably think the video game is named after him, and yeah, I mean it is, but EA Sports Madden NFL is the biggest video game franchise of all time. As of 2018, which just so happens to be the game's 30th anniversary, Madden has sold over 130 million copies. That puts it 12th all-time among video game franchises, and second only to FIFA among sports games, which is pretty impressive considering, unlike FIFA, Madden is only sold in North America. Needless to say, with relatively minimal tweaks and updates required to produce a new game each year, Madden is a huge cash cow for EA Sports. The company sells about 5 million copies of the game every single year at $60 a pop. And over the course of its 30-year history, the game has generated an eye-popping $5.8 billion in revenue. We know they pay the NFL and the NFL Players Association about $50 million a year for the exclusive rights to team and players' names. We know they pay John Madden roughly $2 million a year for the rights to his name. And we know they have a team of like 30 developers and 100 game testers working year-round at EA's development headquarters in good old Orlando, Florida. It probably costs somewhere between $4 and $5 million annually for their workers. However, one person EA is definitely not paying is Robin Antoniuk, one of the game's original creators. Antoniuk was a former college football player turned video game programmer. He spent 3 grueling years writing the source code for John Madden Football, turning the legendary football coach's playbook into one of the most sophisticated video games anyone had ever seen. When the game was finally released for the Apple II computer in '88, there were 2 names on the front of the box. One was John Madden, the other was Robin Antoniuk. However, while everyone else involved in the creation of the Madden franchise has been making money off of it for the last 30 years, Robin Antoniuk hasn't been paid a penny since 1991, and hardly anyone even knows his name. For the last 7 years, Antoniuk has been fighting an epic legal battle against EA for what he says is his fair share of the Madden NFL empire. This is his story. To understand Robin Antoniuk's royalty claim against Electronic Arts, you have to go back to the beginning of it all. EA was originally founded by William Murray Trip Hawkins III. What a name. After graduating from Harvard with a custom degree in computer game design, Hawkins went to work for a little startup called Apple. Yes, however, Hawkins had always been a huge fan of the Stratomatic tabletop sports simulation games, and what he really wanted to do was create a computerized version of the Stratomatic football. So in 1982, he cashed out his Apple stock options, which were worth millions, and used them to make Electronic Arts. In 1984, Trip Hawkins and Joe Ybarra, his top lieutenant at EA, pitched their idea for a sophisticated football simulation to John Madden during a 2-day train trip from Denver to Oakland. Madden knew nothing about computers or video games, but he loved the idea of teaching in-depth football strategy to fans and agreed to join the project. Honest John Madden. However, it wasn't long before they ran into trouble. While discussing the new game with Madden, Hawkins and Ybarra, they informed the former NFL coach that due to the limited computer capabilities at the time, the game would either have to be 6-on-6 or 7-on-7. That was a deal breaker for Madden. If it's not 11-on-11, it's not real football, he famously proclaimed, and he wasn't going to put his name on something that wasn't real football. The only choice EA had at that point was to either abandon Trip Hawkins' dream or to press on and find a way to make an 11-on-11 football simulation a reality. That's where Robin Antoniuk comes into the picture. Antoniuk was a college football player before he got into programming. He joined EA in 1983, and in 1986 he was given an enormous task of sitting down with John Madden and converting every single X and O in his Super Bowl winning Oakland Raiders playbook into computer code. I can't even wrap my head around that. At the time, the average video game took just about 15 months to complete. This one took 3 years, but Robin Antoniuk eventually finished the job. On June 1st, 1988, John Madden Football was released for Apple II series computers. The game's title screen read, "Designed by Robin Antoniuk, Trip Hawkins, and John Madden. Copyright, Robin Antoniuk." In short, Hawkins incepted the game. Madden provided much of its content. Antoniuk made it. The gameplay for John Madden Football was pretty primitive, even by 1988 standards. Plays moved at about half the speed people had come to expect from home video game consoles, but that was because it took all the available computing power we had to run an 11-on-11 simulation featuring dozens of real play statistics and customizable features. Strategically, John Madden Football was a huge leap forward. According to the contract he signed with EA in 1986, Robin Antoniuk was owed royalties for any Madden game he worked on directly, as well as any game derived from his work, plus any remote derivative works, or in other words, games that were derivatives of Madden. To put it more simply, if any Madden game used Antoniuk's original code, he was supposed to get a cut. According to EA, Antoniuk's 1986 contract entitled him to royalties from sales of the original Apple II version of John Madden Football. However, it did not entitle him to the royalties from the Sega Genesis version, which launched in 1990. Aesthetically, the first Madden game for Sega Genesis was very different from the Apple II version. EA told Antoniuk they did not owe him royalties for that version of Madden, he believed them. Should he have? I don't know. In 92, Antoniuk left the company, and sometime between 92 and 95, he received his last Madden royalty check. It wasn't until 2008 that Antoniuk first suspected he was actually owed a lot more money. That year, EA ran a marketing campaign for the 20th anniversary of the Madden NFL franchise, and it touted the game's origin in Antoniuk's game. The campaign made Antoniuk realize that his version of John Madden Football and the first few editions of the game on Sega Genesis were way more similar than he initially thought. At that point, Antoniuk initiated discussions with EA and tried to resolve the royalty dispute privately. When those discussions broke down in 2011, Antoniuk filed a lawsuit against EA. In that lawsuit, Antoniuk alleged that EA breached their 1986 contract by failing to pay him royalties for Madden games he did not develop, but did use his code. More specifically, Antoniuk claimed that every Madden game ever falls under the remote derivative works clause because they all use the same plays and formations he coded. However, the first phase of his legal action specifically focused on Madden titles produced between 1990 and 1996. EA filed a number of motions to get the lawsuit thrown out for a variety of reasons. First, they said the lawsuit was frivolous. Then they said it was filed outside the statute of limitations. But in April of 2013, a federal judge ruled that the suit would go on trial. And in July that same year, the judge ruled in Antoniuk's favor against EA. They agreed that the plays and formations of the Genesis Madden games were substantially similar to the plays and formations coded by Antoniuk, and that the Sega Madden game, when considered as a whole, is virtually identical to Apple II Madden. This was an absolutely huge victory for Robin Antoniuk. Not only would he get more credit for helping create one of the biggest video game franchises of all time, he was also about to get a massive payday. At the time, one of Antoniuk's lawyers estimated the ruling would earn his client a whopping $11.6 million. And that supposedly was just the very beginning. The next phase of lawsuits would go after EA for royalties on Madden titles produced after 1996. If a jury found that EA used Antonic's copyrighted code for Madden titles produced between 1990 and 1996, they may very well arrive at the same conclusion for later titles. Unfortunately for Robin Antonic, in the end, things did not play out like his lawyers thought that they would. As it turns out, they made one huge mistake. In January of 2014, a U.S. District Court judge, the guy who presided over the original trial, threw out the jury's decision, saying there was no actual evidence offered that Electronic Arts had copied Antonic's original work for later editions of Madden. According to the judge, the jury should have compared the Apple II version of the game and the Sega Genesis version of the game side by side and actually compared the code. But they didn't. Instead, the jury relied solely on the testimony of an expert witness. Without the opportunity to view each of the versions, the judge wrote, the jury had no basis for evaluating whether the changes addressed altered each subsequent game. Naturally, Antonic appealed the decision, but in November of 2016, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit upheld the ruling. It was Judge Andrew Hurwitz who argued that, one, expert testimony cannot satisfy a plaintiff's burden of proof, and two, even if the expert testimony could satisfy a plaintiff's burden of proof, this particular expert only said the games appear similar, not that they use the same code. Robin Antonic's legal team subsequently took the case to the Supreme Court. Well, at least they tried. In November of 2017, the Supreme Court of the United States of America declined to hear the case without any comment. 7 years after it had begun, Robin Antonic's case against EA was killed because the actual code in dispute had never been entered into evidence. What? Like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not remotely a lawyer, but like, I think I would know to do that. Robin Antonic's story may not be over just yet. There is still hope for the man who helped launch the Madden NFL franchise. You see, none of the rulings against Robin Antonic concluded that EA didn't copy his code without paying him. They merely said Antonic's legal team did not produce sufficient evidence. Because the first lawsuit only pertained to Madden games produced between 1990 and 1996, Antonic could still sue EA for royalties for games produced after 96. If his lawyers actually introduced the original source of code into evidence, who knows? Antonic might finally get that payday that he's always felt he's deserved, and quite honestly, probably does. I hope you guys like this video. Hope you like learning a little bit more about the game that you love, the game that I love, and going a little bit more in depth with the content that you want to see. Until next time, I'm Mike Cantalupo. Thanks for watching.